Hello everyone. Today's session is about Gladinet Cloud Enterprise and the Active Directory support. There are two different ways to support the Active Directory. So there's case number 1 and case number 2. So in case number 1, the Active Directory is in the local area network and same as the file server. So it's labeled as Active Directory number 1 and file server number 1. There's also a case number 2 when the Active Directory is over the internet. So it could be that, let's say, the service provider is managing the client's Active Directory and file server. So those could be in the same area, local area network in the same data center. It's also possible that the client is about 5-10 miles down the road in a different building. You are helping the client managing the Active Directory and the file server, but the client has their own Active Directory and file server in their own building. So to access, it has to go over the internet. So there's two different scenarios here. And then for the second scenario, we're going to be using the Gladinet Cloud Server agent to help proxy over the Active Directory and also the file server content. So there are two different ways we're going to go over today. Our lab setup, as you can see here, we have the Active Directory, the 10, labeled as 10, and then also a copy of the Gladinet Cloud Enterprise labeled as 11. There's also a remote location, so 50 and 53. So 50 is a Active Directory server, a second Active Directory server in the remote location, and then a file server in the remote location. So we have four Windows servers here in the demonstration. So first of all, let's go over the local scenario, when the Active Directory is local. So what we are going to do is we are looking at the Active Directory. So let's start from the beginning. So we log into the web portal as the tenant administrator, and once we log in, we're looking at the files and folders view, and then we will need to go to the management console. So management console, you can always go to the right topmost menu entry and then find your name, and then you can go into the advanced, and then you can go into the Active Directory settings. So you can enable the Active Directory setting, right? So it's over the LDAP, so that means the Gladinet Cloud Enterprise server has direct connection to the Active Directory server. So the communication here is over LDAP, right? So if you put the Gladinet Cloud Enterprise server in a DMZ, then the LDAP port needs to be open. And if you put the file server behind the firewall away from the DMZ, then you need to open up the SMB and CIFS related ports. So now we have the Active Directory set up, right? So it's very easy for the local direct connection. So now let's see, we want to add some users. Just click on here, and then you can see there are two different ways to import users. One is import users from the server agent, which is a remote location. You can also import users from Active Directory, which is a local location, right? So before we can do that, let's add some users, so we can see the users we added, and then we can import those users to the Gladinet Cloud Enterprise here. So let's create some users. So we can call them Charles and Daniel, right? So Charles local, and see, just create the users. Very standard Active Directory user creation. Most of the Windows administrators will know how to do this step. So there's no it's very just normal tools, Active Directory tools, create a user. So now user Charles is created, and then we're going to go ahead and create Daniel. So it's kind of C and D. The reason we're calling them C and D, Charles and Daniel, is because for the remote location, we have 2 users, Alice and Bob. So ABCD, we have 4 users in this demo session here. So now we are creating Charles and Daniel in the local area network, the Active Directory in the local area network. So these 2 users are created in the local area network in the Active Directory. So now we are going to go ahead and also create a file server share. So we are using the Active Directory server also as a file server. It doesn't have to, but for simplicity, because I'm demonstrating everything from one like a VMware workstation, so different VMs here. So just save one VM for demonstration. So this simulates a file server share in the local area network as well, and then connected by to the same Active Directory. So we're going to set up the share permission to allow Charles and Daniel, those 2 users from the Active Directory. We're going to add them to the server share here. So as you can see here, these are all very standard Windows user and file system control, right? So we're going to elevate the user into cloud. We're going to elevate the file server share into the cloud, and that's what we are doing now. And the Active Directory and file server can be from the local area network, right? So this is case number 1, local area network, not just the Active Directory, but also the file server. And later on in the case number 2, we're going to demonstrate when the file server and the Active Directory is over the internet. We can do that as well. So if you look at the user manager, the 2 users are imported, and then now we're going to import the file server share as a team folder. And if you look at the icon here, it says LAN, LAN means local area network. So we are going to be importing the share from a local area network file server share. So let's just copy that and then paste it into our wizard dialog here. So we need to specify a user who's capable of importing the folder here. So there you go. So the folder is done. So it should be showing up in the web portal here. And the user is also imported. So let's check. Before we do that, let's deposit a file into the test share so we know we are looking at the same share. Otherwise, the folder will be empty, right? So in the test share folder, we have a folder. So the file shows up. So that's okay. So now let's log in as a different user. So if this is the first time you are using checking out Gladinet Cloud Enterprise, I would recommend you checking it out over different browsers because each browser can have some cookies, right? So if you log into the one browser, you are that user, and if you are simulating a different user, it's best to log in that user to a different browser. So you can see the test share for, we publish test share for to this user, and then now this user can over the cloud using browser, right, and to access the same folder. And then it doesn't have to be just the browser. It could be the iPhone, it could be the Android phone, it could be the remote PC and Mac client. So different access client can access to that folder now over the remote location, right? So this is without VPN, and it doesn't have to be using a very chatty SMB protocol over the internet. So that part is done. So we are done with our case number 1 as a review. We connected the Active Directory. We connected the file server share using direct connections. So now let's change topic. So let's say the Active Directory and the file server is at a remote location, a remote building, but the client has a desire to connect that file server over and to connect the Active Directory user over. So let's go in and log in as the admin first. So now we are at the file server, a remote file server, in a different Active Directory. So now let's download the server agent. So the server agent is capable of becoming a proxy for the Active Directory. It's also capable of becoming an proxy for the local file server content, like the shared content. So it fulfills two goals: to connect the Active Directory and also connect the file server share. So this part is kind of interesting, right? Because once you do that, you don't need to have any kind of VPN, right? So the server agent is connecting the VPN for you, and not only it connects the VPN for you, but it also provides the mobile access, right? Online access, remote access. It's all possible with Gladinet Cloud Enterprise. So now we just installed the server agent. So now the server agent installation requires a reboot. So we just reboot, and then after that, we will need to connect the server agent. So the server agent only takes the admin account, right? So you can only log in as the admin account as the server agent. So now the server agent is done. It's a Windows service, runs in the background, and it always runs. So there's not too much front-end UI besides the management console. So we can pretty much just leave it as it is, right? So we also have a remote share. We call it remote share, so we can, tell that it's a share, like a file server share from a remote location. So normally you won't be able to get access to it, but with the file server agent, you will be able to. So now let's start from the team folder migration. So you can see we now use the second entry, which is the migrate over the internet. So now it depends on how many file server agent I have. I have only one, so I just picked that one, and then it discovered that I have a remote share, right? So it's very intelligent. It discovers that, and also it discovers the user, the Alice user, the Bob user. So it discovers all those users from the different Active Directory domain, right? So if that Active Directory domain is in the client's building, a lot of the times people like to call it something .local, right? So to name the Active Directory. So now we have a remote share connected in from a remote file server. So over time, it's going to do sync and share to replicate in between. So that's all cool. So now let's go to the management console again and then double check the users. So you can see very interesting here, right? So you have two different Active Directories, and then the two different Active Directories can be consolidated into one single user manager here, right? So in reality, you probably don't need to do both, right? So you have one way or the other. So a typical client of you is not going to have Active Directory in both places, but it's very possible you have one client in one place and then the other client in the other place. But in either case, you have a way to connect the client's file server and have a way to connect the client's Active Directory. So the direct connection is called add AD user, and the remote location is called proxy user because the Active Directory and the file server is proxied over the server agent. Thank you, everyone.